Chora is a concept from ancient Greek philosophy, notably discussed in the works of Plato, particularly in his dialogue Timaeus. The term itself is somewhat elusive and has been interpreted in various ways by philosophers, but it generally refers to a space or receptacle, a primordial, formless, and generative principle that is distinct from both being and non-being. It plays a central role in Plato's cosmology, where it is presented as a kind of intermediary between the realm of pure forms and the material world. Chora in Plato's Timaeus. In Timaeus, Plato introduces chora as a fundamental principle that serves as the space or receptacle of all physical reality. It is not a traditional space in the sense we might think of it today, but rather a more metaphysical or ontological space. Chora is described as a space of becoming. It is the medium in which the forms take shape and enter the physical world. The forms themselves, in Plato's theory of the forms, are eternal and unchanging, but chora allows them to manifest in the material world. Thus, chora is a kind of mother or matrix for the manifestation of the physical world. Neutral, chora itself is neither being nor non-being. It does not have form or characteristics of its own but rather takes on the properties of the forms that it receives. It is often described as being indeterminate and receptive to the influences of other, more structured entities. A principle of generation, chora is also described as the origin of all things that are subject to generation and destruction in the physical world. It acts as a container that holds the changing, temporal world within it, while remaining itself outside the influence of time and change. Plato's description of chora. In Timaeus, Plato states that chora is difficult to describe precisely, because it is not fully one thing or another. It is a kind of intermediate substance that both transcends and contains the material world. Plato's description suggests that it is neither a fully active force nor a passive container but something in between. In this sense, chora is a receptacle for becoming, not being, and serves as a kind of void or space in which the various material forms can come into existence. It cannot be said to exist in the same way as the forms or the material world, since it is not a definite, concrete thing, but rather an essential precondition for the world of change and flux. Chora and its philosophical implications. Receptacle versus space. 1. In contrast to how we usually think of space in modern physics, Plato's chora does not have a specific geometric or material structure. 1. Instead, it is more akin to a potentiality that allows things to come into being. 1. In this way, it serves as a container or medium for the becoming of things, but it does not itself have a particular nature. 2. Some commentators suggest that chora is closely related to the concept of the void in physics, though Plato's chora is much more metaphysical in nature and is not a void in the sense of emptiness or absence but rather an active principle of receptivity. Chora and the forms. 1. The concept of chora is intimately connected to Plato's theory of the forms, the eternal and unchanging ideas that exist in a realm beyond the material world. 1. In this sense, chora allows for the forms to be instantiated in the material world, providing the space in which they can take form. 2. Chora, therefore, is not an object or thing itself but a principle of becoming that connects the ideal world of forms with the sensory, material world we experience. Chora as a metaphysical principle. 1. Philosophically, chora is important because it challenges the traditional view of space as a passive container. 1. It emphasizes that space, or receptacle, has its own ontological significance, not merely as a backdrop for material things but as an active, generative principle. 1. It represents the potential for things to come into being, and this potentiality is a key part of the generative process in the cosmos. 2. In modern interpretations, chora can be seen as an early precursor to ideas about matter, space, or even the unconscious in more contemporary philosophical or psychoanalytic thought. Chora and Heraclitus flux. 1. Some interpretations link chora to the idea of flux or becoming that was emphasized by the philosopher Heraclitus, who believed that everything is in a state of constant change. 1. Chora is an active principle that facilitates this constant flux by serving as a medium for the forms and material things to come into being and dissolve. 1. In this way, Chora can be seen as a precursor to later philosophical notions of becoming, the notion that change is the only constant, and indeterminacy in the physical world. Chora in modern philosophy. Though Chora is an ancient Greek concept, it has inspired a number of modern philosophical ideas, particularly in continental philosophy. Philosophers such as Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, and Gilles Deleuze have engaged with Plato's concept of Chora to explore issues related to space, time, and the nature of reality. In particular, Chora has been linked to ideas of the unconscious or the presubjective, a place or condition that is outside of structure, form, or subjectivity, but is still crucial for the emergence of meaning and form. Jacques Derrida. 1. Derrida, in particular, saw Chora as a metaphor for difference, the idea that meaning is always deferred and never fully present. 1. In this sense, Chora represents the space of possibility for meanings, actions, and ideas to arise, and like Derrida's concept of language, it is always involved in a process rather than a static entity. Deleuze. 1. Gilles Deleuze also explored the idea of Chora, relating it to his concept of virtuality, the idea that things exist in potentiality before they actualize in a given moment. 1. Deleuze's work on the virtual echoes Plato's idea of Chora as an unmanifest, yet generative principle that allows things to take form. Conclusion. Chora is a foundational concept in Platonic metaphysics that represents an intermediate, indeterminate principle or space that allows for the manifestation of the material world. In Timaeus, Plato presents Chora as a receptacle or space of becoming in which the eternal forms take shape and become instantiated in the changing, physical world. It is not fully being or non-being, but something in between, an ontological principle that facilitates the manifestation of the material world. The concept of Chora continues to inspire contemporary philosophers who explore themes of potentiality, becoming, and the nature of space, making it a key idea for understanding not just ancient cosmology, but also modern questions of existence, reality, and the generation of meaning.